Hey guys, it's Kyle down here at Lunicycle. Today I'm going to show you how to professionally assemble our newest bike. It's the Talaria XXX. The first thing you want to do is cut all the straps and set all the packaging to the side. And then you want to find the small parts box and open it up. So the first thing we're going to do is cut all the straps. Alright, so once you've located the parts box, go ahead and open it up, and inside you will find the left and the right pegs, the stem faceplate and the faceplate bolts, the tools you'll need to assemble this, the front wheel bushings, the little fender bolts and washers. You do have two little rubber straps for cleaning up the wiring. They also include two little peg dowels for the second peg position. You have an owner's manual, and then of course the little key fobs. So the first thing you're going to want to do is install the handlebars. To do that, you'll need the faceplate and the 4 faceplate bolts. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is put the handlebars into the stem and install the faceplate with the 4 faceplate bolts. Now you want to tighten these evenly. And the tool you'll be using is the 4mm Allen key. I recommend tightening the bottom right, then the top left, then the bottom left, then the top right, and go back and forth until they're all evenly tight. And the torque spec on these is 6 Newton meters. So you don't want to crank these down too tight, but you definitely don't want to leave them loose. Alright, now don't worry too much about your handlebar position yet. Once the front wheel is on, you can fine tune where the handlebar sits and be sure to secure all these bolts properly. Now the next step is to remove the front axle from this wooden block. And I'm going to show you some little tricks on how to get that out. Alright, so now it's time to remove the axle from this wooden axle block. These can be very tight. This may be the most difficult part of the assembly process. I am going to show you a few tricks to get this axle out without damaging it. So you'll notice there's still a blue strap on here. You want to go ahead and loosen that blue strap and get this out of here. There is 4 pinch bolts. This is what keeps your axle from moving in and out. There's also an end cap. First thing I do is make sure all 4 of these pinch bolts are loose. They should be loose from the factory, but go ahead and double check. Next, you want to use your 8mm Allen key to back off this bolt a few turns, and if you give this bolt a smack, try not to hit it with metal, hit it with anything other than metal, either a block of wood or a rubber mallet, and this can get the axle to start to move out. On the factory forks, the axle only moves out from the disc side to the non-disc side. There may be other forks offered, and those don't matter which direction you push the axle out, but for this one it goes from disc side to non-disc side. So we give this just one smack. Then we can go ahead and remove this bolt the rest of the way. It can help if you have a helper here to lift up on the bike, and you can try to push this out with your fingers. Sometimes it comes right out just like this one did. So I was able to pull that one out by hand. I am going to put this back in just to show you a little trick I have. So if the axle doesn't want to come out by wiggling it left and right and pushing out, you can use a 3/8 socket. This is nice and rounded, and it really won't damage this metal. You don't want to go crazy hitting it with a hammer, but it can really help to just tap this out. And you can see you got your axle almost all the way out. Alright, the next step is to install the front wheel. If you have a helper or someone that can lift the bike up for you, that can make this much easier. But if you're trying to assemble this yourself, go ahead and find the cardboard block that was in with the packaging. And we're going to go ahead and use this to prop up the bike. We're going to stick this underneath the bash guard, and it'll give you enough room to get this wheel on by yourself. Alright, so once you've got the bike up in the air, you can go ahead and remove the little black brake pad spacer that keeps your pads from touching each other. You do have the two little wheel bushings from your parts box. You want to carefully install these on either side of the axle. There is a little O-ring on here, so be patient that you don't break that O-ring. And then when you're installing this wheel, I find it's easiest to just focus on the rotor. You want the rotor to go into the brake, and then everything else will kind of fall into place. So as you can see, we got the rotor inside of the brake. And then if you remember, this axle goes from this direction. Go ahead and get it through the wheel and into the other leg of the fork. And then you can go ahead and put the axle bolt onto the other side. You use your 8mm. You do want this nice and tight. This is 10 Newton meters. And then you want to evenly tighten all 4 pinch bolts. So once I tighten this one down, if I tighten the one next to it, then all of a sudden this one's loose again. The torque spec on these is 8 to 10 Newton meters, and you don't really want to go above 10 or you can damage the fork. So be sure to do this on all 4 pinch bolts. So you have 2 on this side and 2 over on the disc side. Alright, next we can remove this cardboard block and put this bike down on the kickstand. Alright, the next step is to install your pegs. You have a left and a right peg. The way you tell the difference is if you hold the peg up to where it's supposed to be and you were to hit something, the peg is going to fold backwards. So this is the proper peg for this side. There is a little trick for installing these. If you just try to install it like this, you may notice that you really don't have much room for a tool. You can get it on there with your 15 that they provide. It just is very time consuming and takes many tries. So on the non-kickstand side, it's okay to go ahead and loosen these bracket bolts, and it'll allow you to get a socket in there. I'm going to show you my little trick for that. I don't recommend you do this on the on the kickstand side. There is a kickstand sensor wire behind it, and it can be very easy to mess up that wire, and then your bike won't work and you'll be all upset. So for the non-kickstand side, it's okay to back these bolts out. You can then pull this bracket back a little bit, and then you'll be able to use a socket to tighten this down. and get your pegs nice and tight. If you wanted to install the peg on this back portion, you will need to glue that little provided dowel that came with your parts box. And if you decide to loosen this bracket, be sure you get these two bolts nice and tight once you're done. So you would repeat that step on the kickstand side. Just don't back these bolts out because you may damage the sensor. Alright, next it's time to install your front fender. You have your 3 fender bolts with washers. These use a 4mm Allen key. Alright, so once you've got your fender installed, it's down to the final steps here. I like to sit over the bike, make sure I have my handlebars and faceplate and stem, everything's nice and secure and straight. I go ahead and double check that all these are tight. 4 faceplate bolts are nice and tight. I'm also going to check the 2 stem pinch bolts are nice and tight. And once I'm happy with that, it's now time to plug in your throttle and your brake sensor. Usually the only 2 that you need to plug in are over on this side. Sometimes the connectors over on the left side of the handlebar will be unplugged. But plugging them in is all the same. There is a little arrow on each one, and you do want to line those up. On this side, you do need to match up the colors. So the throttle is green to green, and then the brake sensor is red to red. Just take your time and line up the arrows and plug these all the way in. If you don't plug the throttle all the way in, your bike won't work. So we've got those 2 plugged in, and make sure 2 connectors over on this side are all the way plugged in. Now you can use these little rubber straps to clean up the wiring a little bit. You can put them really where you please. I'm going to put this one here. Alright, now it's time to power up your bike. With the XXX, you do have your 2 little key fobs. The first step to turn it on is to press the little red power button. Then you do have a little sensor right here. You're going to swipe one of your keys over that. Next, your headlight will turn on. Your display will power up. It's going to say wait. You do need to put your kickstand up. And then go ahead and hit the little start button on your throttle here. You see how you have a red start button? When you power it up and hit the start button, it will be in either sport mode or eco mode. Now we do have a whole display walkthrough. This display is the exact same as the Talaria MX4. So you can go ahead and watch that video and it'll give you a walkthrough on how to set up this display and all the features that it has. But the main features you're going to need is just this M button in the middle. This changes it from eco to sport mode. Alright, now the Talaria battery on the XXX is pretty well hidden inside the frame. You're not going to want to remove it to charge it very often. They do have a handy little charge port built into the frame, so this is going to be your best spot to charge it. Alright, now that you've assembled your Talaria XXX, before you go ride, you do need to check the tire pressure. These need to be 36 psi. You also want to squeeze the brakes, make sure they're nice and firm. And it's time to get out there and ride.